interfaces in Java. So till now, we have this. We have an idea about what are classes, methods, constructors, your access modifiers. Then later on, you know what is abstract class, what is the meaning of your abstract class, and then we have started in our last lecture. We have started the topic that is known as your interfaces in your Java. Right. So in interfaces in Java, now I'm not going in the depth of that. I just want to give you an overview is that what is the need of interfaces we have covered so far. And the main thing in your, whenever you are going for your interfaces is that whenever you are going for interfaces, so yeah, this thing is very important is that how you have to use this keyword that is known as your interface and the name of that interface, whatever the name you want. Okay. After that, till now, like till before Java version 8, in interfaces, you can create only two things. Okay. Either you can have a method, instance method, that will be our what? Your abstract method. And second one will be your some variable. And that variable, you already know that that variable, it is mandatory. Okay, it's not like that you can make some different variable like that, otherwise you will get an error. And if you are just writing int min is equals to 5, so automatically your compiler will make it as public static final and like this. So you know the functionality of final means you cannot update the value of min, and again it is mandatory for you to assign some value. If you are not assigning any value, then you will get an error. Okay, so you know the functionality of final keyword. Static means you can directly access this variable within this scope of what your printable interface, and public means you can access this thing from anywhere, no issue at all. Similarly, whenever whatever the method you are writing, that method will be your abstract method. And you know that how can we figure it out whether this is an abstract method or not? So inside your interface, okay? Otherwise, if you are going to write it in your normal class, if I'm going to write this void print like this, then I will get an error. If I will directly write it down like that, then I will get an error. Why? Because now our compiler will suggest us to just write abstract keyword over there. But here inside our interface, our compiler is automatically providing us, so we don't need to write it again. Okay, even though if you want, you can write it, you will not get any error. But it is recommended that if we know the functionality of interfaces in Java, so it's better to directly write it down this your void print, and automatically you will get what your public abstract void print. So till now, you have an idea about that why we are creating an interface, because interface will provide us a kind of a template to our class. So suppose you are working in any project, like I have given you 2-3 examples. So if you require some sort of your requirement specification and all like that, so in that scenario, what you will do, you directly create some interface. So let's assume we have RBI, and RBI wants to set some sort of guidelines. So what he will suggest, he will just say, ki, okay, your bank should have your interest rate method, should have your what withdraw method, should have your deposit method, and so on like that. So in that scenario, suppose SBI or whatever the bank we have, so if they want to implement it, okay, if they want to be a bank and if they want to satisfy the guidelines of your RBI bank, then it is mandatory for them to implement all these methods. So if they are not going to implement these methods, then they are not going to execute their program. Otherwise, again, they have to make their class as what your abstract class, because those classes, that particular class contains some abstract class, and they haven't implemented that class. So now they have to make it abstract. So it means that they are partially or incomplete class. So in order to make it concrete class, they have to execute all the abstract methods that are there in your parent class. So in our last lecture, we have means completed till this slide. So where we have discussed about the similarity and differences between your interfaces and class. This is very important. You should know about this thing is that what are the your similarity and what are the differences among your interfaces and your class. So you already know that in interface, always remember you cannot create an your object inside your interface, because as you already know that we cannot, that class is not complete. So it is not at all why should we create an object. So that is why they have removed this functionality. This your Java language designer, they have removed this functionality, and just because of that, in interface we cannot create an object. Similarly, an interface does not contain constructor. So in interface we don't have constructor, right? Then all the methods. So we are going to discuss about these two things: static, final, and all those things. Sorry, we are going to discuss about default method as well as a static method, because after Java version 8 in interface, what they have done, so till now what we have learned so far is that in interface we can have only two things: either variable, that variable should be what your public static final variable, and second one is your abstract method. But after Java version 8, what they have done, they have incorporated two more methods. So why they have incorporated that particular thing, we are going to discuss about that. Okay. So first of all, an interface is not extended. So we cannot basically extend your interface. We can only implement, it can only be your implemented. So you know the keywords like extends as well as implements. So basically the functionality is same over in both the way. We are basically what inheriting either our parent, your interface, or your parent class. But whenever you are using among heterogeneous, means class wants to extend some your wants to inherit some interface, then a class must use the keyword that is known as your implements keyword. Otherwise, if class is basically, or your interface wants to inherit some interface, then you have to use extend class, extends keyword. Right. So this is what we are going to discuss about. So in the last class, Harshvardhan had posted one very valid question. Okay. The valid question is what he had posted is that why, as you already know that in multiple inheritance, whenever we are dealing with your classes, okay, so it is not possible in your Java programming language. So why it is possible with respect to interface? Because it might be possible that why we are not considering this multiple inheritance with respect to class in your Java programming language, because of the ambiguity. So it might be possible that two classes might have the same name but having this different functionalities, so it might create some sort of issue. So that is why what Java language designer, what they have proposed or what they have suggested, that it's better to remove this concept of class multiple inheritance with respect to class in your Java programming language. But whenever we are going to discuss it with respect to your interfaces, so it is possible in Java. So what will happen if we'll have some sort of ambiguity in that scenario? So in this lecture, we are going to discuss about all the scenarios. So I have basically I will give you some examples. Using those examples, you will understand that okay, why they have basically why they haven't removed that concept of multiple inheritance with your interfaces in your Java programming language. So as you can see directly over here is that whenever a class is basically inheriting an interface, we have to use what your implements keyword. And whenever a interface is inheriting your interfaces, so we are going to use what keyword that is known as your extend keyword. So here you already know that there are different types of your inheritance, like your single level, multi-level, your hierarchical interface, as well as your multiple inheritance. So multiple inheritance, as you already know that when multiple your interfaces are going to be inherited by your class, then it is known as what your a multiple inheritance. Similarly, here also what we are doing, we are again performing multiple inheritance over here too. So let's check it out that why we are not getting any issue with respect to your multiple inheritance. Sorry, with multiple inheritance with respect to your interfaces. And what if we got some sort of your conflict, or we can call it as your ambiguity. Okay, let's check it out. So first of all, I just want to give you an example so that you will understand the concept of multiple inheritance, as most of you now already have an idea about what do you mean by multiple inheritance. So here you can see directly that we have interface named as printable, interface named as what you're showable, having so both of them right now, both methods are different. Okay, named as your void print and void show, both are what our abstract method. Now, suppose if a class wants to implement, okay, these two interface, so we have to use this keyword that is known as your implements keyword, and then we will write it down. So here you can see over there, we are performing multiple inheritance in Java, because at the same time, in a single line, what we are doing, this class is inheriting these two interfaces at a time. So multiple parents, from the multiple parents, this child class is basically inheriting their methods or members, whatever the thing they have, right? So here in this scenario, what will happen here, we will be able to basically now, because this is a concrete class, so you already know that now it becomes mandatory for us to implement these two abstract methods. So that is why what we are doing, we are implementing these two methods. And once we are going to create an object of this your A7 your class, this is, let's assume, my A7 class. So if I'm going to access, because these two are what your instance method, so if I want to access these methods, so I can now directly access these methods, right? So now till now everything is fine. So again, the question is, because in Java, in the case of class also, if somebody is going to ask you with different method names, so in that scenario there will be no ambiguity. Then why they haven't done that thing? Because it might be possible that you might get some sort of ambiguity. So that is why they have removed that part. So what will happen if we will get some sort of ambiguity in the case of interface? So let's discuss about that thing. So as you can see over there, that multiple inheritance is not supported in the case of class because of ambiguity, but it is supported in the case of interface because there is no ambiguity. Means I will discuss what do you mean by ambiguity or non-ambiguity with respect to your interface. Let's discuss about using your examples. So first of all, what kind of conflict we can get? So till now, you know, one thing is that inside our interface, what we can have either a variable, right? Or we can have either a method. So suppose my method name is public void, like this. So how many types of conflict that might occur? Suppose that might occur. So here we can have only two types of conflicts. These are what your method naming conflicts as well as your variable naming conflict. Method naming conflict. So whenever we are going to discuss it with respect to your multiple inheritance in Java. So let's take our first example. So why multiple inheritance is basically supported in your Java programming language. So let's go through by one example. So I have divided this entire conflict into multiple cases. Okay, so let's discuss about our first case, so that some of you might have a question like, what if we will get this scenario, what if we will get this scenario. So I have basically what I have covered all the cases, whatever the possible situations that might occur with respect to your multiple inheritance with respect to your interface in your Java programming language. So let's go for our first case. So here in the scenario, you can see directly that if two interfaces contain some method with a same name, same signature, and same return type, then in the implementation class, we have to provide implementation for only one method. Now, now here you can see over there, using this example, you will understand that here we have an interface, two interfaces we have. First one is your COVID-19 and second one is our SARS. Okay. So you already know that these are the two interfaces which I have created. And inside these two interfaces, what we have these methods, right? And these two methods are what your abstract method. And if you will see these two methods, so what you can see over there, the name as well as the signatures, both are same, okay? As well as the written type is similar too. So means both the methods, abstract method declaration are basically same between your in your SARS as well as your COVID-19 interface. Now let's assume our class main wants to implement what our COVID-19 as well as SARS. So as you already know that because our Java using interface, we can perform multiple inheritance over there. Now the question that comes into your mind is that it will implement which method. So here you can see over there, that is the reason why in Java using interface we are able to achieve multiple inheritance, because you can see directly over there, even though if we are going to use this method or this method, both the methods are same. And here you can see over there, we don't have any body in both the methods. We don't have any body. So if we don't have any body, and if we are going to if we are going to override this method, so I don't think so that there will be any issue over there. While in the case of class, what might occur? Because in the case of class, because in class, suppose these are what our classes, right? So these are what our classes. So in class, as you already know that we have what? We already have, we don't have abstract method. If we are going to discuss about your concrete classes, so we don't have what? Your abstract method, then it is mandatory for you to implement something. So here you will find different implementation body. That is the problem you are getting over there. But here you are not implementing anything. So we just want that particular method. So that is the reason if we are going to define this method, so we are not going to get any error. So that is why if we are going to execute this code, okay, so if we are going to execute this code, and if we are going to create an object, and if we are going to call this method using our your reference variable, then the output which we will get over there is what symptoms are over there. So that is why, that is the reason, because here we don't have any implementation body, so we cannot differentiate among these two methods. For this class, these two things are same. So that is the reason our compiler will never give us any error if we have the same method name as well as same signature and same return type. Now let's go for our case number 2. So in our case number 2, what we have, if two interface contains a method with a name, with the same name. So see, here we have a same name but arguments type. So you can say directly that we have what different your arguments, right? So let's check it out. What is our case 2? So in our case 2, we have an interface named as COVID-19 and SARS. So we have two your what we call it as your two your interfaces, right? But remember this thing. Here we have what? Here we have one method over here. Here we have again one more method. But remember this thing. This method is having different signature. So in your classes, whenever, I'm just giving you one example so that you will understand. Suppose I'm having int void, right, which is taking no argument. And if I'm having one more method, which is taking one argument. So is it possible in our Java programming language? Yes, it is possible in Java programming language. And this concept is known as what? Method overloading. The methods which is having the same name but different signature. So same thing is occurring over here. So here in this scenario, what will happen whenever this class now, it will implement these two methods, then what will happen? It will automatically get these two methods. So here you can see directly that now these two methods are somehow different. They are not same. They are what? different. Why? Because they have different signature. So that is why if somebody is going to ask you like whether in this class we are performing method overloading, so you will say that yes, we are performing method overloading. Why? Because symptoms and symptoms both are method, but they have different signature. So it means that these two methods are what our different methods. So this is our case number 2, when we have a same name but having your different arguments, or you can call it as your different signature. Then in that scenario, now it becomes mandatory. Don't say that if we will implement only this one, then we will get an error, because these two methods are different. Always remember, right? So that is why what will happen, we have to, it is compulsory for us to implement these two methods inside our concrete class that is known as our name. So similarly, if we are going to execute this code, so this code will work, executes fine. Okay, so we are not going to get any error. Now the problem, where the problem that might occur with respect to your what our interfaces in Java programming language. So let's take one more scenario. So if I am going to create a class, so you have to tell me, okay? And let's assume inside inside a class, if we have int, suppose display, which is not taking any argument. Similarly, if I am having void display, right, like this. So what I mean to say is that, and something we are executing, or whatever the statement we are writing over here. So what I'm asking is that suppose we have a class having two methods having same name and same signature. You can see over there everything is same, but remember they have different return type values. Then can anyone tell me that what will happen if we are getting, so our code will execute successfully or we will get some error in that scenario? Yes, anyone? Just post your answer. What will happen in that particular scenario when we will have a methods having same name and same signature, but remember we will have different your return type? Then in that scenario, whether this will be method overloading or not, whether this thing is method overloading or not. Yes, anyone? Just post your answer. So yeah, so Yashwant posted, we will get an error. What about others? Is there anyone who is getting some different answer? Please let me know. Because using this concept, we will try to understand it, our case number 3. Yes, anyone? Aditya again has posted the same answer, that is we will get an error. So yes. So see, here we will get an error. Remember, now the question that comes into your mind is, sir, why we are getting an error? Remember, suppose let's assume you want to create an object of this class, right? Let's assume I want to create an object of this class. Suppose my object name is obj. Now I am calling obj.display method, right? So you should know also the reason why we are getting an error, why our compiler is basically giving us an error for this scenario. Suppose you are creating an object obj.display and you are calling this method, then our compiler will call which method? This method or this method? Because the name is same, signature is same. But here you can see that here our return types are different. So our compiler will confuse that which method you want to call. So that is the main reason in Java programming language, this thing is not your method overloading. Method overloading is only related to your different signature. The method having same name but different arguments are known as your method overloading. But remember, they must have the same return type. Means either, if like in our previous case, we have what? Void and void over there. So that is why we are not getting any error, right? Similarly, same thing is occurring over here, right? So here in the second case, what we are doing it over there is, what if we are having a public void symptoms, and in second interface we have public int symptoms. Now let's assume my this class main wants to implement these two what our interface. So automatically we will get one void method as well as one int method. And suppose we don't have any idea about that. And now we have started implementing these two methods. Then what will happen? So if we are just don't go for this thing, if we are just creating this class having the method having same name, same signature, but having different what your return type value, then what will happen in that scenario? You will get an error, whatever the thing I have already told you earlier. So that is the only case. Always remember, like if somebody is going to ask you in any interview or anything like that, so you will say that there is only one case where we might get some error. Okay, and the error is basically quite obvious, that you already know that, okay, we cannot have the different return type values of the same method having the same name having or the same signature. So that is why you will get a compile time error over here, right? So the question is that then how can we implement this scenario? Is there any solution for this? Is there any solution for
So,
that? Yes.
so for method overriding also can be the return type is equal or different.
No, so it depends. So see, method overriding means, so don't get confused with that concept. Method overriding means, I'm just writing method overriding. Method overriding means you are basically working on the same method name, right? So here, if you are using different signature, if you are using different signature, then what will happen? Here in this scenario, you will get here you can see that these two methods are what our different method. Got the point? So what is your question basically?
So for method overriding, return type value should be same or different.
Okay, you are asking about method overriding, na? Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
So method overriding also it should be same. Otherwise, you will get an error. So I will give you one example. So what I mean to say is that suppose you have a class. So here actually here you can see over there. Here we are performing method overriding only, na? See directly here what we are doing. We are performing method overriding only, na? So you can see that it will not work. So this is the same thing that might occur whenever we are performing what your method overriding. Okay, so always remember the thing which you have to keep in your mind is that whenever you have a class, so remember that your class, whenever you have a class having multiple methods and some of the methods having same name and same signature, but if they have different return type, okay, but if they have different return type, then you will get an error. Either you are getting from inheritance, either you are getting it from some other areas like that. Okay, now the question that comes into your mind is that now how can we solve this issue? Is there any method or is there any technique through which we can basically solve this issue? So the answer is no. It is impossible to implement both the interfaces if we are going to implement both the interfaces simultaneously. Why? Because you can see that it is a basic problem. This is somehow we are basically now considering it with respect to your interfaces, but as I told you here also, whenever in a class you have a method having different return type, having the same name, same signature, then you are getting an error over there. So that is the reason what
Sir,
so same scenarios you might get it over here. Yes.
sir, can there be a different return type and different signatures?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it might be. It is possible. Got a point? It is possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now again, the question is a class can implement any number of interfaces simultaneously. So your answer should be yes, but the answer is except one case. So if in any interview or anything or any competition or whatever the place, or if we are going to ask you about in some competition and something like that, So if somebody is going to ask you like, can we implement multiple interfaces simultaneously? So your answer should be yes, except one case. And which case is this one? Only for this case, right? So this is all about our method naming conflict. So we have covered all your cases. Now let's discuss about variable name conflict. What do you mean by variable? Because as you already know that in our interfaces, we can have what our variables. But remember, all these variables are by default what? Our public static final variable. All these variables are what? Public static final variable. Final means you cannot modify the value of that particular variable. Now, so here in this scenario, what we have created inter COVID-19, SARS, having this symptoms. So you, as you already know that here we will not get any issue. Why? Because method having same name, same signature, as well as same return type. So we are not going to get any error if our class is implementing both our interfaces simultaneously. But where our issue that might occur, here you can see over there in our method, what we are in our class, we are also basically inheriting our these two our interfaces variables also. Got the point? So now if I am going to print the value of system.out.println, right? And if I'm going to print the value of mortality rate, now, our compiler will get confused. Like you either whether you are asking for this mortality rate or whether you are asking for this mortality rate, because both are different. So that is the reason what will happen. You will get an error, and the error is reference to mortality is rate is what you are ambiguous. So this is ambiguous in nature, and that is the reason you will get an error. Now again the question that comes into your mind is like, again, is there any solution for that? So what I have already told you is that whenever we are making a variable, so that variable is what our public static final variable, right? Remember static keyword. What is the main functionality of a static keyword? Is that we can access this variable directly with the name of our class or with the name of our interface. So right now we are using with respect to your interface, so we can directly access that variable with the name of our interface name. So the solution is, suppose if you are basically working in some project or some program and where you don't want to change this variable, because you already know that for COVID-19 as well as for SARS, we might have the same mortality rate and we don't want to change this mortality rate, because mortality rate is different from in both your diseases. But you can see over there, but we just want to fix this value. So here in this scenario, the solution is what we are going to do. We are going, because these two variables are what? Static. So we can call directly using their interface name. So if you want to solve this issue, so what you can do, because that is the reason. See how they have basically the Java language designer, they have created this, even when they have incorporated the concept of variable inside interfaces. So they have they have thought of each and every very simple kinds of things. So where what will happen if we will get these such kind of scenarios and all like that. So that is the reason what they have done. They have made this variable as what your static, so that you can access this variable directly using your COVID-19 dot mortality rate and SARS dot mortality rate. Because of their static nature, we are able to access this thing, and if we are going to execute this code, so we will get an error. So using these examples, what we have understood so far is that in Java, using multiple inheritance in Java, using your interfaces, we can perform multiple inheritance, right? And we can have only in one case we cannot do that, perform that thing, but while in the other case it is possible in your Java programming language. So here you can see that I'm just revising this concept that a class implements interface, but one interface extends other, because this is very important. Sometimes I have seen like students generally get confused related to, and they will use implements over there. Remember that here we have printable. Okay, we have I'm just writing P for printable, and this interface, this is what my interface. So this second interface can only extends this interface, okay, like my showable. So you can see over there like this method, okay, like sorry, yeah, this method. So now if somebody is going to ask you like how many methods, abstract methods are there inside my showable interface, so you will say that one is your print method and second one is your show method. Now if I'm only see if what here I'm doing, here I am just implementing what your this class, but this class will have two methods, right? Two methods. So this is known as what your multi-level inheritance. Multi-level means number of levels. See how many levels are there? Two levels are there. This is my first level, this is my second level, like that. So this is how. So remember, with respect to class, always use implements. With respect to your whenever there are interfaces, then always use extends. Now the thing, the concept that might give you might get confused, okay, after going through this concept. But I will tell you the valid reason why in Java programming language they have incorporated this concept. So in Java, after version 8, okay, so you already know that if you are keeps on basically installing, nowadays we have by default that JDK, but if you are going to install JDK, so you know that there are different version like 15, 16, and so on like that. So after JDK 8, what they have done, they have introduced a new concept. They have introduced a new concept known as your default classes. Remember, sorry, default methods. Okay, so default methods in inheritance. So earlier to your JDK 8, you can have only your abstract method, or you have what you have only your what we call it as your normal your variable. Okay, that will be your static variable, public static final variable. But after version 8, based on the problems, whatever the problems they are getting, so generally why we keeps on updating something, because somehow we are getting some problems, some issues. So in order to resolve those problems and those issues, we keeps on updating, we keeps on incorporating new features. So that is why what they have done, they have introduced a new concept of default class inside our Java programming language. Okay, so inside your interface, now we can create a method named as your default method. Remember, this thing is that default is a keyword. If we are not going to write default, then we will get an error. Now the question that comes into your mind is, why do we need default method? And if we are using this default method, because in default method we can have a implementation body. But earlier, the main motive of designing an interface is that we can just or we can just give our classes a kind of a template, okay? That okay, and it contains only your abstract method. But now what we have default methods. So how we are going to? So then, what is the reason why they have incorporated the concept of default method? So let's take one example, and using that particular example, you will understand the concept of default methods in your interface. Okay, so
So,
just
sir,
go through the definition. Yes.
so then there will be no difference between abstract class and interface, right? By using by when a default
No,
method
no, no,
is.
no. No. There are, see, over there you can have instance methods, right? But here, this method is not your instance method. This method is having some different functionality. I'm going to discuss about that part also. What about? See, this is a different method. Here I am not writing only void message. If I am going to write void message, then this method is what? This method is an instance method. But right now, this is not an instance method. This is a default method. So there is a difference. So we are also going to discuss about what is the difference between abstract method. Yeah, you can say, but somehow you can say that now earlier there is a lot of difference between interfaces and your abstract class. But by incorporating your default method and one more method, that is your static method, somehow they have means fills the gap of difference between your interface and your what we call it as your abstract class. So first of all, we will discuss about what is the need of basically default method in your interface. So let's go for the definition part or theoretical part. So before Java 8, interfaces could have only abstract method. The implementation of this method has to be provided in a separate class. So if a method is to be added in an interface, then its implementation code has to be provided in the class implementing in the same interface. So till now, whatever the thing we are performing, we are performing before our version 8. But now what is happening? Why do we need the concept of default methods in our interfaces in our Java programming language? Let's go and just try to understand this concept, and I will go for this statement, right? So let's take, this is my case 1 and this is my case 2. So actually, why do we need your what we call it as your default methods in your interface? So let's take our first example. So in our first example, what we have an interface named as bank. Suppose this is what our RBI. So RBI gives us some guidelines that, okay, you have to create 2 methods. And now my SBI as well as my PNB, they are basically executing or implementing these 2 methods. And now everything is working fine. So till now, no issue at all. But but after some time, what what RBI wants, they want that every bank should implement one more method that is known as your this deposit limit method as well as withdrawal limit method. Now, what RBI has done, they have modified their interface. So earlier we have only 2 methods. Now we have 4 methods. So right now, let's assume SBI as well as PNB, they have no idea about these 2 methods till now. Once they have basically, our RBI has basically modified in their interface. So what will happen? So automatically we will get an error. What will happen? We will get an error. Why we will get an error? Because our SBI is inheriting our bank class, and our bank class is having 4 abstract method and we are implementing only 2 method. So whenever you are making any changes in the methods of our interfaces, so automatically all the child classes will give us an error, and that will be a very big problem. So right now, suppose in reality we are working, suppose SBI bank, their application is working fine and they are in here they are implementing interface bank, and somehow they made some changes, and just because of these changes, what is happening basically, we are getting an error. So automatically our SBI, PNB, whatever the bank we have, they start giving us an error, and we don't want this thing. So that is why they came through these such kind of errors. So that is the reason Java language designer, they have proposed a new method, and that method is known as your default method. So it's not like that you can use default method anywhere on any place, whatever the place you want. See, you should know the reason, the limitation. Okay, it's not like that the only if I know these 2 methods and I will make these 2 methods as what my default method. No, never make this thing. So always use, even though I'm not saying that you will not get any error, but the functionality of our default method is what? The functionality of our default method is whenever you are creating and whenever you want to make some changes in your parent interface, then it keeps on it will not give us an error in our child class. So that is the reason what we are going to do. We are going to create a method named as your default void method, and it is always recommended to use these method only if whenever you want to modify your interface. It's not like that you can use it anywhere. Okay, so that is why, so suppose if you are working in any organization or any company like that, and if you will see that okay, now they have made some changes where in our default method, so yes, you can override these methods. If you want to override these methods, so you will not get an error. And the question that comes into your mind is why they have not made this thing as your normal method. So if they will make this thing as so, it will create a lot of confusion. So that is why to make it more to give or to make it more understandable that what kind of method these are. So that is why they have made these methods as what our default method. And if you want to override these methods, so you can override it. Okay, so no issue at all. But remember, always use these methods not in your first time, but on the second time. Second time means when you want to update something, when you, and some of your classes, child classes are basically already, if they have already started your what in implementing your that particular method, so it is always advisable to use what your default method. So similarly, you can see over there now. Now again, the question that comes into your mind is because here we are performing what multiple inheritance, and here we have implementing body. So how we are going to resolve this issue with respect to your interfaces in Java? So in interfaces, when you will trigger these such kind of issues, okay, where you are basically having what your default method and the method having the same name, same signature, and your same return type, but having your different your body, then how you are going to resolve this issue? So remember, so in order to resolve this issue, what you can do, you can directly use the name of your interface. Okay, so see here in this scenario, what I have done, so I have basically overridden this method. So yes, our this method can override this method. So you already know that because everything is same, so it is possible in Java that you can override this method. But suppose if you want to call your parent class, so how can you call your parent class? Because if you are just using super keyword, so you are having what you are having this your main class will having two interface, your parent one and your parent two. So if I'm just using super.fun, so my compiler will get confused and it will give me an error that which parent you want to call, right? So in order to sort out this issue, so in your using your default method, what you can do is you can use the functionality, you can use the name of your interface, so whatever the name you have. So here we have parent one. So if I am going to write parent one, then your super.fun, then automatically what it will do, it will directly call my parent one what our method. Okay, so that is why you can see directly over here is that the output of the program is what our parent 3 and your parent 1. I'm getting what parent 1 and parent 3. So don't say ki we will get an error over here. So see here we can perform method overriding because according to our this class we can override. So that is the reason they have made this class as what our default class, because they have added some extra functionality with respect to if we are going to compare it with our instance method, right? So this is how. So if somebody is going to ask you about when to use default method, so never say that a method having we can use a default method anywhere. So practically you will not get any error Even though, see, I'm using it over here, but remember when to use default method whenever you want to modify your interface. It is advisable. Okay, like that. Now, similarly, we have one more method that is known as that. These methods are known as what your static method. So you already know about static method in your classes. Similarly, we have static method over there. So what is the concept behind static method is that whenever we are working with respect to class, we can directly call those methods using our class name, right? Using directly, and we cannot override our static method. This is very important point. Okay, we cannot override our static method, right? So similarly here, what we are doing, we have created what a static method, okay, in our interface. So now if you want to access this method now, so what you have to do, you have to call this method only by using the interface name. So if you want to call this method, your static method, remember you have to call using with the help of your interface. So whatever the thing we have learned so far in our by your classes, like how when to create a static method, similarly same concepts is there in the case of your static method. Now the question that comes into your mind is when to use a static method and when to use your default method. So you already know the concept of when to use default method. Whenever you want to make some modification in your interfaces, always use your default method. And when to use your static method? So you can use this method as what your utility method. So we generally use this method as what our utility method. So suppose you want that somehow you want to use the functionality. Suppose, see here, I want the functionality of cube, suppose in one of my class. So what I will do, I will directly call this method, and based on that, I will directly see if I'm going to write. So I have used this function. I don't want to override this function. I don't want to, I just want to call directly with the name of my interface. Okay, so this is basically, if you want to make it as your utility, then always try to and make it as what your static method. Got the point? So remember this point is that in most of the scenario, you will see that in interface, we have only abstract method and all, but after Java version 8, they have incorporated these two methods, and you know the reason why they have incorporated these two, right? So if somebody is going to ask you that, well, can we implement a static method inside your interface or your default method? So you will say that yes, it is possible in your Java programming, right? Now, I just want to give you an overview. While these things are not that much important, but still I just want to give you a overview about, and you will heard about this thing. Okay, you know that okay, it is possible in Java. While we are not going, because the application is very less. Okay, if we are going for nested interface and all those things, and your application is very less, but still I want that you should know that these concepts, or these are the features that are there in our Java programming language. First concept is nested interface in Java. So yes, always remember that in Java programming language, we can have a nested interface. In nested interface means we can have an interface inside interface. So you can see that this interface is basically inside this interface. Okay, so it is possible in your Java programming language. So let's take one example of this thing. So here you can see that here we have an interface showable, and this nested interface message is inside my showable, what our interface. So if I want to implement this method, remember, see, this thing is quite complex, but still I just want to give you an example is that if you want to call this interface now, so you cannot directly call this, you cannot directly call it as message like that. Okay, so if you are going to call it as message, then you will get an error. So always remember, first of all, you have to call your outer interface, then you have to call your your internal, whatever the message you have, right? So this is how basically what you have to do. You have to call your interfaces in your Java programming language. So it is possible in Java programming language, right? Now, similarly, nested interface, which is declared within a class. So again, remember that inside your class, you can declare an interface also. So how can you declare it? So it's quite simple. You will create a class and you will create an interface inside that. So these things are, I'm not saying that these things are very important. These things are not that much important, but I want that you should know the answer. If somebody is going to ask you and if you will find out, okay, whether we can create nested class, nested interface or interface inside class, is it possible? Then you will say, but inside your interface, you cannot create a class, remember, okay? But in a class, you can create an interface like this. So if you want to call this your interface, so how can you call this? So using this, you directly call the class, that is what our a dot message. And remember, you have to use this implements. Why? Because we want to implement this particular message. But there are some rules is that interface can only be public and default access modifier. So here you cannot, you can either make it as default or public, okay? And this interface declared in a class can either be default, public, protected, but not private. Remember these points. So these are the things that are there with respect to your nested interfaces and nested classes in your Java programming language. So this is just an overview. So don't get confused that, okay, we might give you some error questions related to that. No, you are not going to get these such kind of questions on these topics. Okay. But still what I want that we might ask you a very simple kind of question. We are not going to ask you about complex question on that, but we might ask you simple basic questions related to that, so that we just want that you should know about these concepts, so that it is possible in your Java programming language. So now the question that asked me that what is the difference between interfaces and your abstract class in your Java programming language? So in abstract class, we can have either your abstract class method and your non-abstract method, means your concrete methods. While in the case of your interface, we can have your default static as well as your abstract method. Then abstract method does not support your multiple inheritance, remember, but interface supports your multiple inheritance. Then an abstract class can have final, non-final, static, and non-static variable. So it depends, because it has the functionality of your entire class. But in interface, we can have only static and final variables. See, this is and, not or. Okay. So a variable that have static and final functionality. Similarly, an abstract class can provide implementation of interface. So yes, you can implement an abstract class can implement an interface, okay? But an interface cannot provide implementation of your abstract class, right? So it can only inherit what? An interface, but it cannot implement either interface as well as their abstract or any class like that. Abstract keyword is used here, interface keyword we are going to use. And abstract can extend another Java class, so we can use this by using what your and implement multiple Java interface. So you know that in a single line we can extend as well as we can implement multiple interfaces. But here in the case of interfaces, we can only extend, okay, your interfaces. We cannot basically extend the classes and all like that. Similarly, here we use extends keyword. Here, whenever we are implementing, so we use implements keyword, right? A Java abstract class can have a class member like private and protected, and it always remember that member of a Java interface are public or by default. Public by default. So it is always public. So as you already know that in public, static, final, so automatically we are getting what your public key. So this is the difference between, so here you can see over there, we can have like this. Here we don't need to this thing if we are going to create a interface like that. So that is the difference between a abstract class and interface. And you can add two more points is that you can have a constructor inside your abstract class, but you cannot have a constructor inside interface. Okay. So this is also, I have missed that point, but remember this point that in interface, you don't have constructor, but in abstract class, you have a constructor. Okay. So this is all about our today's lecture. Okay. So if anyone is having any doubt, please let me know. So in the next class, we are going to start our new topic, but still, I just want to give you an overview about what are anonymous class or like this. Just one topic is left remaining. Okay. Anonymous class. So that you should know that, okay, in Java, we have anonymous class like that. Okay, so in the next lecture, we are going to discuss about anonymous class, and then we are going to discuss or start our topic, and the topic will be our what our this thing error, whatever the